The Board of Trade is apolitical. Never endorse any particular candidate or party, but we want the public to learn about the candidates as well as their party's platforms on various issues so that you can make an informed decision when you go to the ballot box. We'd like to thank the Legion for allowing us to use the hall for this event. It's great to have different community organizations like this working together to benefit the residents of Cochrane. I'll start this with a land acknowledgement. We begin our meeting by respectfully acknowledging that we are situated in a traditional territory of the Cree people of the Ottawa-Tagamou First Nation located in Treaty 9 territory, and the Métis who have chosen to settle in this area. I'll start with a set of rules we have to try and ensure a fair and respectful debate. We ask the candidates to follow these guidelines. First, we'll start with opening statements. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and present the party's mandate. The speaking order we've determined by pulling numbers out of a hat. So we're starting with Rick as number 1, then 2, 3, and 4 down the line here. The question answer format after the opening statements, there will be a series of pre-selected questions. Each candidate has 2 minutes to respond to the question. The order of responses will be rotated to ensure fairness. So candidate 1 answers first, then 2, 3, and 4, and so on. The second question, it'll start with candidate 2, on and on that way. Actually, candidate 1 is going to start with the opening statements. Candidate 2 will start answering the first question, and then we're going to keep rotating. Okay. We're going to have a timer to ensure fairness as well, to make sure this responses stay within the allotted time. The candidates will get a 10-second warning as it gets close to their time being up, and then another warning when the time is up. Luke in the back, thank you for that.
Double barrel.
Yeah, he's got the 2 flags ready to rock and roll. I thank Luke Dinan for that. So this is not a debate. So as far as our audience participation goes, there was not. We did intend on there being open microphone for public questions. There may actually be time at the end though. If we can get through the questions and if the candidates have a chance to give their closing statements in a timely fashion, there's a little bit of time left. There may be time for some audience questions. Also, I've spoken to the candidates ahead of time, and they would be willing to stick around if you wanted a one-on-one question with them. Not everybody wants to get up and speak in front of the mic, so we just want to make sure you can get the information you need tonight. As far as event conduct goes, the candidates are expected to maintain a respectful and professional tone, not to interrupt each other when it's someone else's time to speak. And I will reserve the right to intervene as necessary. And as far as closing statements go, at the end, once we've gone through all the questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing statements. I want to thank you all for your cooperation in making this event informative and equitable for all. So right at this time, I'd like to introduce your candidates. Sitting next to me is Rick Ellesmere from the Liberal Party of Ontario. Thank you, Rick. And then we have the New Democratic Representative John Vantoff, our incumbent. And next to him is Chris Rivard from the Green Party. And at the very end down there is Stephen McLeod from the New Blue Party. How about a round of applause for everybody? I want to thank all these candidates for getting involved in the political process. It's important to have people engaged, and it's important people like you in the community to be engaged. So let the games begin. Okay. So first we'll start with the opening statements. Rick, you have 3 minutes. Would you like to make your opening statements?
Sure, thank you very much. I'm Rick Ellesmere. I would like to thank the Cochrane Board of Trade and everyone for coming out tonight. I identify as a Métis, and I have dedicated my life to volunteer. Ask my wife, I'm a chronic volunteer. Right now I'm president of Inglehart Minor Hockey. I coach 2 teams, and I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I'm a trained aerial spotter with the Civil Air Search and Rescue Association, CASERA, out of Earlton Airport. And we do search and rescue. In my actual work life, I'm a public works operator with the townships of Charlton, Dak, and Chamberlain. So I have seen the infrastructure literally come out from under our feet. I was a member of the emergency response team during the April flooding we had, where Charlton, Dak, and Chamberlain had to declare states of emergency. The Liberals are focusing on issues that matter to all families in Canada. Improving highway transportation, safety, and maintenance. We can't get over the carnage we have seen on the highways in the last few years. Of course, sprinkling healthcare services. Talking to quite a few people, they have not been able to get in and see their doctor in a timely manner, if they have a doctor. And of course, enhancing the education for our youth. I have 3 school-age children, 5 to 9, and I've seen the trouble that they've had. So thank you guys again for coming out, and look forward to answering some questions for you.
Ready to go? Go ahead, John.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Vantoff. I represent the NDP party, and I'm the incumbent, was the incumbent MPP till they called the election since 2011. I'd like to thank the Cochrane Board of Trade for organizing, for as far as we know, the only debate in this riding. It's a real tough job, and but I'd really like to congratulate them, and it shows forward thinking on their part, and it shows the role that Cochrane plays in this riding. So I'd like to focus on that. As the incumbent, I have a record to defend. I've been here for a while, and I'm here to defend that record. Now, in the legislature, we can't mention when somebody's not here. The government, the person who's here representing the government party or isn't here, also has a record to defend. Now, they could have a very important event tonight or something. I'm not criticizing them for not being here, but I am making it known that someone who wants to have a job speaking for Timiskaming-Cochrane on behalf of the governing party in this province needs to be here to speak. So I'm willing to defend my record. I've got just a little bit about me. Before I got this job, I was a dairy farmer. My wife ran a dairy farm for 2 years after I did, and decided that she no longer wanted to be a dairy farmer. She's way better than me. I have 4 grown kids who didn't want to farm either. They're successful. All of them moved away, and one of them moved back. And she works in the riding, and it was a very great moment for us, and that's a goal for all of us. We all want our kids to fly, but we all want them to come home. And one of our biggest goals we need to all think of is making sure that that our kids can come, that other people can come, and that when they come here, they have services and they feel safe. And when you talk about safety here in Northern Ontario, and I'm sure it's going to come up in the questions, but highway safety is an issue. And I'm just going to end with this, that the only people who brought up highway safety in the last session of the legislature were the NDP. Not one Liberal question on highway safety, Not one Green question, and not one Conservative brought it up unless we questioned them in the legislature. And that's for Northern Highway Safety. And I'd like to thank you very much for coming.
Go ahead. Next up, we have Chris Rivard from the Green Party. Chris.
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to start off by thanking the Cochrane Board of Trade and all the volunteers involved, and especially to all of you who took the time to come out tonight, because as he mentioned, this is the only one that we know of, and I think these events are very important. So I'm looking very forward to having a chance to present myself, the Green Party values, and my vision for Northern Ontario here tonight. My name is Chris Rivard. I'm born and raised in Sturgeon Falls. I'm educated in Northern Ontario. My wife Janik and I just had a son. He's just under 2 years old, and we're expecting our other one in about a month. So that's a little tough to do with this election right now, but I'm pushing through. Off to the important stuff. I believe I have lots to offer to Timiskaming-Cochrane. I believe I'm well educated, I'm a good communicator, I have the energy and enthusiasm necessary to meet the demands that we face here in Timiskaming-Cochrane as well. And I also have the political acuity. Last time when I ran in 2022, I didn't have much in terms of experience in politics. But now I was recently elected in 2022 as a municipal councillor in West Nipissing, where I became the youngest ever municipal councillor as well. And that was at 30 years old. Now 32, I sit on the chair, I am the chair of community services. I sit on the Doctor Recruitment and Retention Committee, as well as the Rec and Culture Committee, and I also sit on the Environmental Services and Economic Development Boards. So I'm starting to learn quite a bit about what we have here in Northern Ontario, what we can do, and how we can be better. This is, as mentioned, this is my second time running to be the MPP. In 2022 I did so, and since then I was elected on the executive board of the Green Party as the Northern Ontario representative, where I was heavily involved in creating one of our first ever Northern specific plans. And that's something that I'm very proud of. I chose the Green Party because I strongly believe that we're here for the people and our communities. We support small businesses, and something that sticks with me is we want to put people before politics. We don't want to start playing party politics when we're at the legislature. So we care about the people and the places we love. And something I'd like to mention is I always believed everyone wants what's best for Ontario. All of us here, we do care about our future. It's just we all have different ways of going about doing so. And my idea is that the Green Party has the best plan that we put forward. We actually want to help the people of Ontario, put the people before politics, and be a voice for you. I can listen to your concerns and vote with your concerns in mind if I go up. I don't have to listen to what my party tells me to do or vote, which is something very special that the Greens can offer. We do have a platform that I might be able to touch on a bit tonight. It focuses on, but I'd like to concentrate on my 5 top priorities, which is properly funded healthcare, highway safety, affordable housing, caring for the people of Ontario, and support for our northern municipalities. There's the 2 flags. Thank you very much.
Okay, next up we have Steve McLeod from the New Blue Party.
Hi, yes, my name's Steve McLeod. I am the candidate in this riding for the New Blue Party of Ontario. A little bit about me. I actually ran in the 2021 federal election for the People's Party of Canada. And I've had quite a few people ask me why I've downgraded. That's what people have kind of said to me, is why are you downgrading? And it's kind of interesting because I don't see it as a downgrade. What I've done is I've actually taken a good hard look around at both provincial and federal. And your elected federal representatives always say, and I was same thing, we want to help our riding, we want to help our riding. And then when they get into Ottawa, they don't do much for our ridings. Very few of them actually have much to do with their riding after they get elected. And I don't like that because I want to help people. I want to help the people in my riding, and that's my passion. Whereas I look at our MPPs, I look at John Vantoff, I look at what he's done for our riding, what the awareness that he's brought through about our highways. I look at a bunch of other MPPs here in Ontario and right across the provinces in Canada, and they actually can do a lot of good for their riding. And I said, you know what? Instead of trying to pretend that I'm going to do something good for my riding, I want to actually do something good for my riding. So that's why I'm here today. That's why I'm representing in New Blue. And like Chris and John have said, as far as we know, this is the only question period that we're going to actually get in this snap election. So I too want to really thank the Cochrane Board of Trade for hosting this and putting this on, because this is not an easy task. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for coming out on a Wednesday night. I know the weather is not actually the nicest either, but I mean, what else do we expect here in Northern Ontario? Am I right? I want to thank my fellow candidates that came here, especially like Chris, all the way from Sturgeon Falls. You know, that's quite a hike. Like, we have a massive riding here in Timiskaming-Cochrane, and I really want to thank them for coming out and being able to share with us. I am kind of disappointed that I have an empty seat here beside me, especially considering he's supposed to be representing the current elected government.
That would be an empty conservative
hey, you know
seat,
what?
folks.
It gives more chance for us to really share with you guys and get to know us. So I really want to thank you. I'm not going to take a lot of time here to talk about my top 5 priorities, because we have a whole bunch of questions here, and I think when we get into these questions, that's going to be very clear what my priorities are for this riding. So thank you very much, and look forward to this.
Thank you, Chris, and how about a round of applause for all our candidates here from Sturgeon? Yeah, I did get an email today with apologies from Tory Gloria that he had prior commitments in southern part of the riding, and he couldn't make it. So we're going to move on forward with the people that could make it, and thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to start with questions in different areas that are important to Northern Ontario and the province as a whole. The first category is going to be infrastructure, which is probably no surprise to anyone here that we're going to have questions about our roads and such. So we'll start with John, because Rick did the opening statements. So John, the question to you would be, what is your plan and what funding commitments you can make towards enhancing road safety, particularly for the highways with high accident rates? And this is going to be this, just so you know, everyone gets the opportunity to answer the same question. So I'll repeat the question back to John. Again, what's your plan and funding commitments you can make towards enhancing the road safety, particularly for highways with high accident rates?
Thanks very much. I think anyone who's been following this campaign and been following what the NDP and myself have been doing for the last few years is highway safety in Northern Ontario has been our priority. We have been hammering the Minister of Transportation on this issue, and this is the fact that I use most of the time. So if your car is registered in the District of Timiskaming and you all drive through it, and it's involved in an accident on a provincial road, it's 4 times as likely to be fatal than if it's registered anywhere else in the province. The government knows this. We hammer them on it all the time. I think we came up with a Northern Highway Safety Plan. We did this in consultation with tow truck drivers, with driving schools, on the things we could do and the things the government could do right away, short, medium, and long term. We've been hitting the government, the Conservative government, on this for a long time. I think we've come to the realization that we need to build a bigger coalition. And regardless of who is in the government, we need to build a bigger coalition to keep this issue on their minds. One thing they could do right away, and this is our immediate ask, there are 100 trucking companies in this province right now who can recruit, train, and license their own drivers. And they're in the list of the worst accidents. And when they license their own drivers, their tests, they pass 95%. If they go to drive test, it's 65%. They could fix this now. And they refuse to. So what we need to do is what you need to do is elect me, and I'll keep pushing them, but we need to build a bigger coalition to go beyond Queen's Park to fix this problem. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Chris. Oops. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd just like to touch that. Based on my experience of just driving up here this week or back when I was a child, playing hockey up in Northern Ontario, tournaments in Cochrane, these highways have always been dangerous. This has been a long time, and that's something that I think everyone, if you're trying to access healthcare, if you're trying to go visit a loved one, if you're trying to go to school, go to work, or even just go to your hockey game, like I said, you should feel safe driving on your highways. I get it, some weather events will make that difficult, but at this point, it's just, I never really feel safe. I drove up here with my mom today. The amount of times she was flinching when 2 transports came by and there was this big cloud of snow, it makes me flinch. You know, I'm trying to stay calm for her. So something that I'm really proud of, when I mentioned the Green Party of Ontario's Northern Plan that I worked on, something that I really pushed for, I was saying was, we need to divide Highway 11 from North Bay to Cochrane to begin, and then you do the rest. And then people always say, how are you gonna pay for that? You can't pay for that. Well, to me, if you spend any amount of money to save one life, I think that's worth it. But also another way is if we don't go out and spend billions, they're looking at $100 billion for a highway, a tunnel under the 401, which will never happen. Or it may happen, but it'll cost even more than $100 billion. We could take a fraction of that price and just divide our highway, get it done and over with within the next decade. But I strongly believe that we have to put a strict timeline. We can't keep saying we will divide it, we will divide it. We need to put a timeline. You know, if it's 2 years, we will have the design and plan ready. 10 years, we will have a majority of it, say 70% complete. I get some areas are tougher with lots of bridges. I'm looking at Latchford or a lot of those difficult areas where you got to blast out rock. But we should be able to get it done, and that's something that I would really make a priority.
Thank you, Chris. Next we have Steve.
All right, well, the question here was about funding commitments and that, and too many times we hear politicians promise X amount of dollars, and it's not funny to me, but the funny thing is they never seem to tell us where this money's coming from. They just keep promising this, promising that, without telling us where the money's coming from. So I don't want to make empty promises here when we were talking about funding. I don't believe that. I don't like. Empty promises with money, especially when it's not mine, when it's yours, is a scary thing, right? So what I actually want to commit to doing is making an audit of the MTO, both the roads division and the enforcement. Because there's a lot of money going to the MTO, but where's it going? Why don't we have our weigh scales open more often? Why don't we see more enforcement on the roads? Why are our roads in such a terrible shape, right? So I want to take an audit of that and to find out where all this money's going. I want to trim that excess fat, put the money where it needs to be, get our roads better. Like, our maintenance is horrible. When you drive down, I'm a long distance trucker. I drive these roads from one end of the province to the other on a weekly basis. When I can drive down the road and I know where one patrol yard stops and the other one takes over because I'm going from bare wet road just completely snow covered, no wonder we have so many accidents on our road. John's right, we have some drivers here that probably should not have a license on our road. Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. But when I couple that with poorly maintained roads, I'm asking for accidents, and I don't want that. So I want to actually take immediate action, get our roads better. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Rick.
I have seen the carnage up close and personal on too many accidents. I started as a firefighter down south. I had 400 to deal with. Up here I have Highway 11 to deal with. I've cut too many people out of cars, personally. I also worked for the highway contractors, and there's a simple way of getting the snow cleared. Have them follow the matrix that is put out down south. a lot of the patrollers and everybody up here, they look at it, they go, Elroy works down south. I proved time and time again, because I did the matrix exactly down south, it clears roads. And it's very simple. There's another thing, if there's a Trans-Canada highway, there should be money from the federal government. I have talked to an MP just last night, and he was telling me they keep trying to take it over, and then when they do, the provinces push back, and they can't take it over. So, the big thing, love to see it happen, is consistent highways right across Canada. Because you go from Maritimes into Quebec, a totally different highway, come into Ontario, totally different highway, get out west, and the highways are totally different again. But if you have one consistent with proper rest areas, like every 100 kilometers of proper rest area, that would help alleviate a lot of stuff.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to housing now as our next section. So we'll start with, Chris. The question to you, Chris, Chris Rivard from the Green Party is, what is your strategy to address the affordable housing crisis in rural and northern Ontario communities?
Thank you very much. This is a question that the Green Party has put a lot of work on, our housing affordability plan. And this is something that I strongly believe in as well, is we used to build affordable homes, geared to income homes in our municipalities. I know in Sturgeon Falls we have some homes where it was geared to income affordable housing, and we haven't seen any new ones since I've been alive. I'm 32 now. So it's 90% of our affordable geared to income homes built by the province were built before 1997. And so that means that our province has kind of let this slide. They've given up on this part of life for anybody who needs affordable housing. And that's something that we got to get back into the business of doing, is building affordable homes. It's much cheaper to house someone than to deal with them at the emerge or in prison or what have you. It's a human right, and we should be in that business. It'll really alleviate a lot of problems that we could see. And just everyone deserves to have a safe place to call home. I think when you go home after work or after visiting someone, it's really nice to be able to get home and feel at home, right? So there are a lot of people in our communities who don't have this luxury. And it's always been there, where there's been some homelessness in our communities, but now I don't know about everyone else, but for me it seems like it's more visible to the eye when you're driving around or just spending time in your community. So this is something that the Green Party's on board with, is getting back in the business of building affordable geared to income homes. This does not mean your suburbs at $500,000 homes. Those homes can still be built by private businesses and such. I'm speaking about your truly affordable, deeply affordable homes, so that more people have somewhere safe to call home.
Thank you. Next we have Steve McLeod from the New Blue Party.
Well, as with anything, housing is directly impacted by supply and demand, all right? So our federal government right now is bringing over 500,000 immigrants into Canada. And they all need a place to stay, just like you and I do. But what this means is we have a much higher supply than our demand than the supply is available. There we go. Much higher demand than we have supply of housing, okay? This is why we have such a crisis right now. And it's made by both levels of government, right? From the federal right to the provincial, because Doug Ford is encouraging it, is welcoming, creating all these incentives to bring in more new immigrants, and he's just adding to the problem. So what we, as the New Blue Party, we actually support Ontario having more control over its immigration, sort of like Quebec has. We want to set our own immigration levels. We want to have full control over settlement funding provided by the federal government. And this in turn will actually help us to cool off our overheated housing market. It will bring things back to a more stable level for both resale homes and new sale homes, not to mention to stabilize the new home building cost of materials, all right? The other thing we want to look at is the HST. We want to drop the HST from the 13% it is now down to the 10% and eventually get rid of it, which will also help in the supplies that we need to create additions on our homes, to build new homes, to fix our homes. And all this in turn will actually help alleviate this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now we have Rick Ellesmere from the Liberal Party.
I'm going to start off with the homeless crisis. It is an absolute tragedy. It is heartbreaking to see what people are going through, especially in freezing temperatures. Doug Ford, he just thinks he can make homelessness illegal. But he's failed to build homes or the health care that the people need. People are suffering because Doug Ford puts himself and his rich friends first. Instead of a $189 million early election, why didn't he build more affordable housing and get people off the streets? The Liberals are successful. We will be eliminating the land transfer tax for the first-time home buyers, senior downsizing, and nonprofit home builders, saving families and seniors an average of $13,500 off the cost of a new home. Second, we will scrap development charges on a new middle-class housing, which can add up to $170,000 on the price of a new home, and replace them with the Better Communities Fund to ensure that provinces invest and benefit from sustainable municipal growth. Making renting more affordable by introducing fair, phased-in rent controls similar to Manitoba, resolving landlord-tenant board disputes within 2 months, and establishing the Rental Emergency Support for Tenants Fund to help vulnerable renters avoid eviction during financial emergencies.
Thank you, Rick. Now we have John Vantoff from the New Democrats.
Thanks for the question. First, on homelessness, right before the legislature rose, the Ford government introduced legislation to end encampments, homeless encampments. And one of the parts of that legislation, that if you are ordered out of an encampment and you don't move, you could be fined up to $10,000. If you're living in a tent, you don't have $10,000. So these are people. They're not, dust bunnies that we can shove under the rug. So the first thing we're committed to do is build 60,000 deeply affordable units to get people off the streets, to give them a hand up. Chris is right on the government got out of the business of helping to build homes in the 90s. And as a result, there is no place for people to start. Everyone wants to own a home, but there's a whole generation now who might never get that opportunity because there's no place for them to start. Does the NDP want to build houses ourselves? No. We're not going to swing hammers. But do we want to create a fund that helps people who build houses to build houses that they wouldn't normally build? If you're a contractor, you do not want to build a house you're going to lose money on. We get that, right? But you do know how to build housing. We will help you build houses, that deeply affordable homes that people can afford. But the government is going to need to help you. Is going to need to step in to help you. On the rental part, we deal with the landlord-tenant board all the time here. And it's different than cities, because lots of times the landlords are hurt by the landlord-tenant board for how long it takes. We need to fix it so it goes much faster. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, now we're going to move on to healthcare, another very important area of discussion. and something that we have been dealing especially hard. It's been an especially big challenge for us here in Cochrane. So, how will you address? So next up actually will be, sorry, it's Chris is going to start this time, I believe. Oh, sorry. Yeah, my bad. It's Steve McLeod and New Blue Prairie is going to answer this first. How will you address, Steve, the critical shortage of doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals in Northern Ontario?
Great question. Well, first off, the New Blue Party supports the rehiring of nurses and healthcare workers fired as a result of COVID-19 mandates. We support the clearing of backlog of procedures by offering choice in healthcare services, including private healthcare options. As a province in 2024, the budget included $85 billion in healthcare funding. Again, this comes down to something I see lacking greatly, and that's accountability. Where is that funding really going? Why is it that someone is waiting over 2 months on a referral to a specialist in Sudbury, and every time he calls in to follow up on his referral to find out where it is, he's passed to another secretary? He's been through 4 secretaries. 4 secretaries for one specialist for a referral. To me, I can't wrap my head around that, and I don't understand why. We need to find where our funding is going, where it's being wasted. We need to stop the waste so that then we can use that money to attract more doctors, more healthcare professionals, more nurses, more specialists. We're desperately in need of specialists, especially in our riding. I have a great nurse practitioner, but my wife and my children don't have a doctor. Okay? This is something that is very, very dear and near to me, especially as a diabetic. We need more healthcare professionals here, and I'm committed to finding ways to bring them here. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Now we'll go to Rick Ellesmere.
Thank you. To help with the medical, the Liberals will create 2 new medical schools and expand capacities in the existing medical schools, doubling the number of medical school spots and residency positions. Accelerate the process to integrate at least 1,200 qualified and experienced internationally trained doctors over 4 years through the Practice Writing Ontario program to first match and then exceed the capacity of similar programs implemented in other provinces. Eliminate the fax machines, enhance virtual care, introduce centralized referral systems with patient portals, and implement electronic medical records to let doctors and other healthcare professionals in the circle of care focus on patients instead of paperwork. ER wait times have increased 48% under Doug Ford. 2,000 people are treated in the hallway on any given day. 1,200 ERs were closed in 2023. 11,000 people died waiting for surgery or diagnostic procedure. The Premier has joked, you need a CT scan or MRI, you should go to a veterinarian clinic. 1 billion would hire 13,000 nurses. One agency nurse that they hire for the hospital, you could put 2 PSWs in the hospital for that same price. And right now, 200,000 people are waiting for a CT scan or an MRI. And we need 33,000 nurses and 50,000 PSWs by 2032.
Thank you, Rick. Next up, we have John Vantoff.
Thanks for the question. Everyone knows we've got a huge doctor shortage, a huge healthcare worker shortage, and we're all going to promise more doctors for the NDP. It's 200 general practitioners in the north and 150 specialists. But the one party who isn't here have had 7 years to do it, and they're giving the same promise. And right now we have 2.5 million people without a doctor, and not just here. And I've got to give a shout out to the administrators and the hospital staff in Timiskaming-Cochrane that we haven't had recurrent emergency room closures, because it's happening all over the province. Sometimes I hear, oh yeah, well, if only we were represented by the PCs, things would be so much better. Emergency rooms are closing throughout the province, but not here. And it's due to the dedication. How are we we have to increase the seats in the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. It works. Half of the doctors in Northern Ontario have had some kind of exposure through the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. We need to do that right away. We need to find doctors, and one other thing that we need to do, we have to stop the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games of one town competing against another town, competing against another town, right? It shouldn't be up to the municipalities to pony up to see if they can get a doctor. That is healthcare is a provincial responsibility. We commit to creating a provincial northern organization to actually do that. Because some places are more successful than others. We need to learn from each other, but not fight against each other. That's what we need to do. We need to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And now we have Chris Rivard.
Thank you very much. Well, I first off, I'll start off that everyone deserves to have accessible, timely healthcare in Northern Ontario, right? That's just a human right as well, similar to housing. And the cost of providing emergency care is far more expensive than providing primary care. And what happens there is then our emergency wait times increase, or they get burnt out, or they have to close just because nobody wants to work them anymore. So we need to bring more doctors to the north. But something that I learned sitting on that doctor recruitment and retention committee is that it's very difficult. As Mr. Vantoff said here, we're all competing with each other's communities. And it doesn't work because everyone's just throwing money and asking municipal councils to throw more money at the problem. We do need provincial help. What I mentioned at our council table was it's a community problem, which then ends up being a provincial problem, which then ends up being a federal problem. It's everyone's problem. This is a human right that we have to tackle. So two plans that we brought forth at that committee was we partnered with Northern Ontario School of Medicine to have the West Nipson General Hospital as a training facility for their students. So then they train there, and there's a better chance that we can retain them because now they get to see our community, love our community, grow in the community. So that's my idea there. And something else that I fought for in the Green Party plan was we need provincial support to add incentives to all of our communities. So that's not your taxes going up to attract doctors. This way, the province would give the money and we can go out and actually give a doctor a certain amount of money or incentive or something so that they could stay in our community. Once we have them here for 3 to 5 years, they're gonna see they love Northern Ontario and they won't wanna leave. That's my idea on it. So I think the current government hasn't got it done, and this is one way I strongly believe that we can get our doctors in our communities and to stay in our communities. And something else I'd like to mention is, I'm not sure if my second kid will have a family doctor. We managed to get my first one with my family doctor, and now we're worried for our second one.
Time's up. Thank you, Chris. Okay, healthcare is a huge issue, and it's near and dear to my heart, of course. Let's move on now to economic development. Okay, so next up, I believe is Rick starting now? Okay, yeah, okay. I'm gonna keep it all straight here. So Rick, how does your party plan to invest in sustainable industries that provide long-term job growth in the region?
Okay, basically, they want to invest, they're more concerned about the tariffs right now, they're going to be coming. So they will be setting up programs to try to make sure those people do not get laid off and give them incentives to stay in Ontario. They want to grow the economy and create jobs by fixing the education system. And that's what Bonnie Crombie and the Ontario Liberals want to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Now, John Vantoff.
Thanks. I hope there's a whole question on tariffs because it's an important issue. But when I talk to employers, recently I was at a mining conference, talked to representatives from one of the biggest employers in my riding, big employer here, and said, if there's one thing that the government can do for you to help your business, and the answer was, provide services that our employees need, healthcare, education. So if I'm coming to somewhere, they're attracting an employee to a town, and the employee has a special needs child, and it's a great job, a great place to work, but no place for treatment for that child, you know what? They're going someplace else. If there's no daycare, they're going someplace else. We have the jobs, we have the entrepreneur spirit here, we have the companies, there's so many things we have. Even, you know how much I love to talk about roads, or hate to talk about roads. Even you track people, they take 1 or 2 trips up Highway 11, they're gonna look someplace else. Government needs to support the basics so that companies can do what they do best. You know what attracts companies to Canada is great healthcare, so they don't have to pay it. And those things we're letting slip away, and especially in Northern Ontario. Especially in Northern Ontario. That's not just me saying it. When I talk to employers, the biggest employers here, that's what they're telling me. You know, creating the jobs isn't, sure, we all want to create more jobs, don't get me wrong, but creating the jobs isn't the issue. It's finding the people to fill those jobs and keeping them here. And what keeps them here, it's a great place to live, but we're lacking services that the government should be providing. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Next up, we have Chris Gerard.
Thank you. Yeah, that is something that comes up quite a bit, is just having good jobs and good industries in Northern Ontario. And as John mentioned, what really attracts investment is having well-supported municipalities, good highways. So, because why would you want to invest millions of dollars in a business if there's a great chance that the highway is going to be closed 3 days a week during the winter months? It makes it difficult. The logistics of their business they don't really make sense at that point. It becomes more difficult. You could go down to North Bay or Parry Sound and have that luxury of always having an available highway. So that's something as well. If you invest in your people and in your infrastructure, what happens is you can attract more investments. And people, they do love our communities when they come here, but there's all those unknowns, right? We have infrastructure deficits. So then they may be worried if they have a workforce, taxes may rise to keep up with these infrastructure deficits, and then the workers may end up moving towns or whatnot. So these are all ways we just have to support our communities' infrastructure deficits from the provincial government. We also have to reinvest in our critical infrastructure, like our highways. That's kind of what attracted people here in the first place, say 50 or 100 years ago. We built our nice highways, our railways. We got to get back into that business of supporting Northern Ontario to try and spark investment up here. And that could really support our mining industry, agricultural industry, manufacturing industry, because we do have a lot to offer here. And something that I don't like is when we say we mine all our minerals or cut down all our trees, but we send it elsewhere to be processed. We can keep our value-added jobs here and really support these industries and kind of, get back to what Northern Ontario used to be all about.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chris. Next up, we have Steve.
All right. Well, for me, this is where I see it. I want to cut the taxes. Get rid of this stupid federal carbon tax. I know it's federal, but as a province, we should have the right to say if we accept to do this or not. I want to cut the industrial carbon tax that Ford's PC government has put on our industries. I want to get rid of the carbon pricing system. This will all go a long ways to stabilizing the sustainable industries here. I also want to work with our fellow provincial electors right across Canada to get rid of the inter-provincial trade barriers that we have right here. It is not right that I can go to a grocery store and buy apples from Washington, but I can't buy apples from Okanagan Valley, BC. Canada is such a rich country, right from one end to the other. And we need to be able to share with each other, to trade with each other right across our borders. And that is something that is a passion of mine. We're all saying right now that we want Canada first, buy in Canada, made in Canada. How can I do that when I can't buy something from Alberta or Saskatchewan? My hands are tied, right? Let's get rid of this inter-provincial trade barriers. Open up that. Let's start trading with our fellow provinces and see our economy grow right across Canada, but also right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I think that's it for this line of questions. Okay, so we're moving on to education right now. So we're going to start with John Vantoff. Question to you, John, to start this off. What is your plan to address teacher shortages and to supply quality education in rural schools? To add to that a little bit, I have two university-age daughters, and I've been involved with the school system as a parent. Often what you see is students from the north having a difficult time when they get to post-secondary because the level of education, the quality of education isn't quite up to what they're receiving in Southern Ontario, so they'll struggle against their students down south in university and post-secondary settings. So to repeat the question, what is your plan to address the teacher shortage and supply quality education in rural schools?
Thanks very much. Education is the basis of our society. So the first we can start was actually respecting the people in the education sector. And I wish that Conservatives were here because that isn't happening right now. It just isn't. So they have cut the education sector by $1,500 per student. And if you heard Premier Ford, oh no one spent more on education. But if you look at per student, they've cut. You've got teachers bringing school supplies themselves to schools. Like, we need to change that. We need to treat education with the importance that it is, that it's the building block of our society. We also need to change the funding formula, because when schools are smaller, like in Northern Ontario, and more spread apart, it costs more. It just costs more, and that's getting back to your question. That's one of the reasons why it's harder in Northern. If you have a special needs kid, because they don't have the critical mass, let's say, of the Toronto School Board. So you need a different funding formula for rural Ontario, Northern Ontario, than the one-size-fits-all that we have right now. We need to do that as quickly as possible. And I just don't think, I know we're not supposed to criticize, I don't try to criticize others, but the Ford government, I've been there for a while, and I've never seen a government treat educators with less respect than the current government. They really, really don't get it. And until they do, not only our kids are going to suffer, our educators suffer, but our whole society is going to suffer from that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now we have Chris Rivard.
Thank you very much. You must have said something right, because my mom was a teacher and a principal her whole life, and she started clapping. It's the wrong person. But so my
vote for me.
Yeah, we already voted.
Oh, okay.
So my father too actually was a teacher, and my sister's a teacher in Northern BC. So it's something that I've always heard all about back in the Harris days. That's kind of what got me into politics back when they weren't receiving paychecks, and I was always wondering why they were at home all day and why I wasn't at school. I kind of enjoyed it. I don't know if they did as much. But John kind of said everything there is, right? It's the $1,500 per student. That's the big number. Because they'll always say we spend the most, but that doesn't, when you speak it in relative terms, it's actually much less. So there's always that kind of double speaking that's going on with the current government. They'll say we spend the most, but with inflation and with added more students, it actually doesn't add up. Schools are closing, and that's something that we have to stop. Something that I've always believed in is to lower the teachers' college back to 1 year. I understand how it's 2, but that kind of hurt me from going into it. Right when I finished university, it switched to 2. And I remember both my parents who were in there their entire life, they said, don't go do that for 2 years. I'd suggest just going back to work. So that's something that I think we could really increase the amount of teachers we have right away, and quality teachers. These people, if you did 4 years university and you did a year of teachers college, like, you're pretty well trained already, and you can start getting in the classrooms and helping our students. We need more EAs as well to support. I've heard some horror stories. I'm a little younger, so some of my friends have said some horror stories. I don't think I'll repeat them here about what goes on in schools, and it kind of gives me a unique perspective on things. But that's just something that I wanted to mention, was that 1 year teachers college, and these are critical years of students' development. So let's start investing in them.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Now we have Steve McLeod.
All right, I'm going to apologize here because I'm going to read off my paper. There's a lot I'd like to cover here. So, a lot of people talk about the teachers are underpaid or they need more pay. I don't think that higher salaries is actually the answer, because Ontario teachers with 10 years experience or more already receive higher salaries than their counterparts in other provinces. So if increasing teacher salaries across the board was the solution to teacher shortages, I think we would have solved that already. Like Chris said, I think we need to look at reducing the number of education courses that the teachers must take before they can become certified. Most education courses offered by faculties of education are worse than useless because they typically focus on more social justice activism than sound educational practices. Finally, I think the province needs to get serious about cracking down on violence in the schools. When administrators fail to enforce basic standards of behavior in schools, students and teachers feel unsafe. And that's one thing our party wants to do, is bring back the Safe Schools Act. We can all agree that not much learning is going to take place when you don't feel safe. There are far too many times when teachers are victims of violence, and no teacher should ever be assaulted. I believe students who engage in this behavior must face significant consequences. Because if teachers don't feel supported by their administrator and safe, they're not going to stick around. Teachers don't stick around, schools close, classes get bigger, teachers are overwhelmed, burnt out, more teachers leave. It's a vicious cycle that we need to stop. I believe simplistic policies such as increasing spending on government schools are not the solution. I believe that real action is needed, and that's starting with the Safe Schools Act.
Time's up. Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, next up we have Rick Ellesmere. Your thoughts on this?
We know under Doug Ford, our children's learning outcomes have suffered. Classroom sizes have grown, learning gaps have widened, and students are not getting the support they need. After the Mike Harris government, it was the Liberals who rebuilt the system. They introduced full-day kindergarten, lowered class sizes, and raised teachers' pay. We need to put the education back as the center of our economic plan, because without high quality education, our economy is faltering. Doug Ford has deliberately underfunded our public schools and post-secondary schools, all while enriching his wealthy insider buddies. Ford's government is constantly fighting with teachers, with constant looming strikes and uncertainty for parents. I know with 3 kids, we've spent some time at home teaching. We're not good at it. And they're underfunding school buses. And in Northern Ontario, we got kids getting on the bus at 7 in the morning, and they don't start till 8:45. That's kind of sad, spending a couple hours a day on a school bus. Schools are in crisis, burnt out teachers, less programs, and less support for students. My sister-in-law is a teacher, and I've got two of my assistant coaches are teachers. I haven't seen them for a couple weeks because they've been out doing report cards. And they put a lot of their own time in and their own money.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you all for those answers. So, we're gonna move on to the environment. We have a question here on, and we're gonna start with Chris. This question is, how will your government support sustainable resource development while protecting Northern Ontario's environment?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. So I actually work, I didn't get to mention that in my opening, but I work for the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority. My education was in environmental studies, a bachelor's from Laurentian University, and postgraduate certificate in environmental management at Canadore College. So the environment is something that I've always kind of held dear to my heart and something that I've cared about. And I strongly believe in the need to do proper environmental assessments. Now that I'm in the municipal realm of things, I'm seeing how lengthy these can be or difficult. So I wouldn't mind, we need to support our Ministry of Environment, our Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, so that these assessments don't take the 2 years they need. Because, say if you dump snow from your snow removal process, that then becomes an environmental assessment phase 1, which then it makes everything get longer. So something like that, where we want to build affordable housing in West Nipissing, now we're having a hard time because we have to go through that process. But environmental assessments are very needed, and they're required to make sure that it'll be a sustainable investment and a safe investment for not only the people, but the environment as a whole.
Thank you, Chris. Stephen McLeod?
I have quite a few friends that work in the mining industry and in the forestry industry. I know some of the procedures that they have in place. There's some of the strictest policies that they have is when they get to the environmental stage for forestry and for mining, for reclamation for mines. They are intense. Now, like Chris said, I think it's very important that we keep this at the forefront. So what I want to actually do is I want to keep on top of the programs that they have in place right now, continuously monitor them, keeping an open dialogue with the different companies, with the mines, with the logging, and by keeping that open dialogue, then we can adjust the programs as needed to make things smoother, to make things better for our environment, as well as the companies that we have that are working there. And that's basically my answer. It's short and sweet. I believe in accountability, and this is the way I see that. It's by keeping in contact with them and adjusting things as we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Now we have Rick Ellesmere.
Thank you. When I came out of college, I worked in Terrace Bay at Kimberly-Clark, project engineering. And listening to the Northern debate last week, it saddened me to hear that that mill is mothballed. It produced a lot of hydroelectric power, and it sent stuff to the States. A lot of what they call liquor, and it makes pine salt. So we were getting a lot going down. So, it provided a lot of jobs and everything else. So, now Ontario Liberals have committed to develop a comprehensive action plan to help farms become more resilient to drought, because very higher intensity rainfall and other extreme weather events. And all these events cause different actions to go into the environment. The Liberals will not have a carbon tax on consumers. I know the Doug Ford government says Bonnie's going to be bringing carbon tax. No. She wants to make a Made in Ontario climate plan, something robust that we can all live with. currently she's meeting with stakeholders and environmental leaders to hear their inputs and suggestions. She's not going to try to lead blindly.
Thank you, Rick. Now we have John Van.
Thanks. I'd like to touch on sustainable resource development first. As NPP, I get to talk to a lot of people and to a lot of companies. And so there's a lot of mining going on here. I'm a farm boy here. We're going to talk about mining. So it's not the amount of regulations that's the problem. We need strong regulations. If we look at places like cobalt, where there were no regulations, we're still trying to clean those messes up. So you need strong regulations. But what drives companies crazy is there's no certainty of when the approvals are going to happen. So as an example, one company here, it can take 10 years or 15 years to approve a mine here. Nunavut has stricter regulations than we do, and it takes 3 years. Right? It's the certainty. That's what, if you're trying to raise $1 billion to open a mine and to do it right, you need certainty. That's one of the things that we need to build in artisan. But getting rid of regulations is actually going to hurt the mining sector. It really is. Right now, everyone trusts mining because mining is doing a great job. But making less regulations, no. Making the certainty, the ladder of when you can get an approval if you're doing everything right. My son's a commercial diver, and he sent me a video of a tailings dam letting go in Brazil. And he sent it to me before it came on the news. The same company has the same type of tailings dams in this province. And he said, Dad, that's why you need strong regulations, because it's the same company, and people in Brazil died. And they're not dying here because we have the regulations. We're busy at those dams fixing that problem. Thank you.
That would be Valet Inco out of Sudbury, Ontario.
Thank you, John. And I guess we're moving on to the next question. This is on public safety. A crisis that's been developing and that we're all aware of is the opioid crisis. I'm going to start with Stephen on this one. What is your plan to address the opioid crisis and improve addiction support services in the region? So, Stephen McLeod.
Yes, thank you for the question here. The New Blue Party and I, we actually oppose provincial funding for drug injection sites. These sites, we believe, only further the addiction. They don't help the patients. I would much rather see funding go towards proper detox facilities where those who want help can get the help and safely detox. I want these sites to be able to have the mental health professionals involved in there so that they can get the help needed to stay clean once they're released. And I want training involved, skilled training, because we do have a shortage of skilled workers. So let's get skilled training in there so that when these folks leave these programs, they can find jobs quickly. Because what that's going to do is that's going to boost their self-esteem, that's going to boost their self-worth, and give them a higher chance of succeeding and staying clean than what we have right now. So again, what we want to do is actually stop the provincial funding for these sites and instead get them proper help and get them clean and back out there working again. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have Rick Ellesmere. Rick, here you go.
Being Métis, I understand that Indigenous people account for 10% of the overdose deaths out there right now. And Indigenous women are 8 times more likely to have non-fatal overdose and 5 times more likely to have a fatal overdose. So it's kind of scary. The opiates are coming over the border, and hopefully the new border czar, I hate that term, border czars, but I hate that term, will put a halt to the opioids and the illegal guns. They go hand in hand coming over the border. I grew up in Midland. Talking to my friends back there, they tell me that drugs own the town now, and it's scary. You know, it was a nice little town. So
That's the
we
same
need
for
to
every
fund our
community
police,
across Canada.
give them the tools to actually do the enforcement and not handcuff them.
Thank you, Rick. Now we have John Vantoff.
Thanks. We need to treat the opioid addiction, mental health crisis as what it is, a crisis. This isn't something that we can ignore anymore. It's getting worse and worse. And it's not just affecting, wayward teenagers and people who don't. It's affecting all our families. There are hardworking people who've died from opioid overdoses. Now, as supervised injection sites, we all have our different opinions, but without them, your whole town is going to become an unsupervised injection site. So the hard hubs that the Ford government has proposed, actually, I'm not opposed to those, but we need a lot more, because quite frankly, if the hard hub is one in Sudbury, right? Well, people from Cochrane are never going to get there. I know that. We need to treat this for what it is, a crisis, because we're losing our best people, and we need to go. We need to have, the police need to have the tools they need to do, but we're not going to police ourselves out of this crisis. We're not going to throw enough people in jail to fix this crisis either. Part of it goes back to education. When there are people who we know that we can help, if we had the tools in the education system, if we actually had the mental health tools. How long do you have to wait here for a psychiatrist? Over a year. Well, quite frankly, most people will be dead before that year comes. We need to treat this for what it is, a crisis, and we need to act. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now Chris Rivera.
Thank you very much. I also believe that this is what I like to call it is a crisis of caring. And it becomes a crisis of housing, crisis in our healthcare system, crisis in our mental health system. It's a crisis of caring. So everything comes together here, and this is what happens when you underfund these type of programs to help people in housing, healthcare, mental health. The Greens want to make, we have a slogan, mental health is health, and it should be covered just like our healthcare.
It's more than a crisis.
The
it's
crisis
an
is worse in
epidemic.
Northern Ontario than any other any other part of the province. And I see this firsthand. Personally, a lot of my friends I went to high school with 15, 20 years ago, they're starting to fall victim to this opioid crisis. And it's just sad, right? Nothing's really happening. So that's why I think that if you start helping people not fall through the cracks by providing them a safe place to call home, a deeply affordable home, it might help them get back on their feet and maybe, find a different route instead of falling into these, what some people would call ruts or cracks. And that's just why this topic is a very difficult one to tackle. There will always be some people who suffer from this issue. But if we do start to fund these systems, at least even a little bit better, it doesn't have to be billions and billions, but we need to start working across party lines as well. That's something that the Greens really want to do when it comes to the crisis of caring. It's not blue, green, orange, red. This is a crisis for all of us, right? Some of my best friends are PC. I don't say, oh, it doesn't matter that you're suffering through this. No, we are all a community and we all care about each other. So that is my my sad take on the opioid crisis.
Thank you.
Just quickly to verify, it's a little bit more than a crisis. I would say it's an
Thank you,
epidemic
Chris.
that's been continuing for over 2
We'll
decades.
move on to the next category is transportation. We'll start off with Rick. Rick Elsner with this question. I'm going to basically combine a couple of areas in this question. So do you support the restoration and expansion of rail services in Northern Ontario? And also public transit options for northern communities? Go ahead, Rick.
I live in the heart of ONR. I live in Englehart. And I'm on committees and fire department with many ONR employees. I absolutely support the expansion of the Ontario Northlander, especially, but we need to support it. They've told me stories of when it was around, where you have 1 or 2 passengers on the whole train going down to Toronto. So we need to support it that way. In the meantime, until it comes out, I believe it's 2026, we need to make the Ontario Northland bus schedule more favorable to the average person. I know I've looked at it a couple times in the past, trying to get down to Toronto to pick up a vehicle down there, and it was not favorable. I think I would pick up the bus in Englehart at 1 in the morning and arrive at 2 in the afternoon in Toronto. So, and then I'd have to take transit from there. And that was the last time I looked in it. There's also some other new companies coming into Canada. One is Flixbus. It's a European company, and they're doing phenomenal express services. Track them up here, because I know a lot of people have to go down for medical appointments in Toronto, and they dread either take a personal car, but they dread not having an easy way down.
Thank you, Rick. Now we have John Van Top.
Thanks. I grew up in Englehart, went to school in Englehart, and never worked in the railroad, but I kind of breathe it. I was on the last Northlander trip up here. My best friend was the engineer. It was tough. And I tried to use the Northlander as much as I could. But it was hard. Because, quite frankly, the schedule did suck. There's no other lack of a better word. And you can't run an empty train. And I'm going to give the ONTC credit. The ONTC now is a much different company than it was back then. I know that from the commercial side. We used to have a hard time farmers getting a load of grain onto an ONTC car. Not the case anymore. They really want to do that. They really changed. So they need to, if they do the same thing with the new Northlander, it'll be great. But if the new Northlander comes back, and we all support it, and I fought really hard for it, but if it comes back and in a year or 2 years it's empty again, we've all got a problem, because you can't, it's hard to make an argument for an empty train. And it's really hard to make an argument that we're really serious about it, when I believe there's only north of North Bay, there's only 1 bus a day now. So not really trying to build up the ridership for public transportation, right? We want that train back. We need to have that train full. The schedule needs to be, it's a long distance, so I get it. The price, we haven't seen what the price is yet, right? I haven't heard the government say how it's going to be paid. They say it's going to be paid by, public transportation is subsidized in the GTA. There's no reason why it shouldn't be subsidized in Northern Ontario. Thank you.
Yeah, I saw the 2 questions.
Thank you, John. Good time. And now we have Chris Rivera. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start off that when I speak with people I know from down south, often what they say is, "Hey, I remember taking that Northlander train up to Cochrane, and it was awesome. It was beautiful, and it's something that I never really got the chance to experience." But I did get on a Via Rail from Jasper, Alberta, all the way back to Sudbury when I came back from out west, and it was quite an experience, right? You get to see different parts of the country that you'll never get to see. So I'm fully for this idea, and something that hasn't been touched on yet is, we were speaking about highway safety earlier. This is a great way to remove cars from that highway and have people using that rail system instead. And then something else I noticed driving up, my mom and I, when we were putting up signs, knocking on doors, we noticed every community here has a beautiful train station. So you can tell that it was a big part of the history here along the Highway 11 corridor. West Nipissing, French River, not so much, right? But we can still drive to North Bay if we want to take the train up to Cochrane. But these are just, to me, it's something that we should be investing in. It's a great way of public transportation. As he mentioned, there's not enough up here. And another part of the question was the question only regarding the Northlander?
It could be other public
Intercity.
transit options,
Okay,
basically.
yeah.
You can include bus with that. Yeah.
Nice, yeah. So something I always thought was neat was in Timiskaming Shores how they have that intercity bus system. That's really neat for Northern Ontario, a smaller community, to have that. I know West Nipissing, we have been trying to do something just for our seniors to get from our smaller communities to Sturgeon Falls, where we have our pharmacies, our hospital, our bigger grocery stores, or just to go see their friends, spend a day in town. So these are all things that, stuff like that will probably require provincial subsidies, and all of these will come back to my main point of removing cars from the highway. If you have 20 people getting inside a bus, that's potentially 20 less cars, because most people drive a car all by themselves if you're ever on the 401 and you look next to you. So that's a lot of cars for very few people.
Thank you, Chris. Next up, we have Stephen McLeod.
Well, like all the other gentlemen here have said, we're all in support of the rail. I know John has actually been a great proponent for it, and I appreciate that very much. And I know if I am elected, I am actually going to take that and run as hard as I can as well with that. Maybe I'm a little too excited and I'm a little pie in the sky, and John might correct me on that, but I want to see that, and I'm going to push harder for that. I want to see it done faster, because I don't understand why it's taking so long. We got Doug Ford talking about building a tunnel under the 401. I don't care about a tunnel. I want to see that train here. How about we take that money that he wants to put into there and actually put it towards something that's useful, like the train up here to service our communities. Like Chris said, it's a safer option, right? Especially this day and age on our roads. Do you want to be on a bus traveling down our highways? Or would you rather be on a train that's not on our highway and that's a little safer? I'd rather be on a train. So I want to see the funding that he wants to take and put towards this ridiculous tunnel, and put towards something useful like our train stations and our train. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. We're actually doing a little better for time than I thought. So I think we can take about a few minutes if we have any questions from the audience at this point before the candidates all make their final statements. If there's any questions at this point that anybody would like to make, I can set up the mic over here for you. So does anybody at this point have anything they'd like to ask? Okay, you understand.
I don't need a mic.
Okay, very good. We can hear you.
So speaking about transportation in Northern Ontario, one of the things that I've mentioned to many different politicians over the years here in Ontario and elsewhere across the country is the fact that we have the largest, most unpopulated country on the planet. We all know this. So why are we last in place to actually initiating a speed rail system? If we had a speed rail system coming from Toronto to the northern sector, we could actually look at hundreds of thousands of opportunities for people in those populated centers to make it advantageous for them to actually move into the north, into the rural communities where it's much more affordable. Opinions?
Who wants to go first? You can put your hand up. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. Are we doing 2 minutes for the answers here?
Yeah, we can do 2 minutes. I don't think it'll take. Yeah.
So I believe the question is high-speed rail?
Yes.
Yeah. So just a little person. So my wife is Dutch, and we go back to Holland once in a while, and we were waiting for a train, a high-speed train, and I saw a light in the distance, and I looked at my read and I said, "Is that the whoosh?" And it went by, like almost blew me off, like that kind of trip. I'm going to be really upfront. If I was going to put high-speed rail, I would put it someplace where we get a lot more cars off the road. Honestly, I would put it between Montreal and Toronto, or Montreal and London. I really like it. We're way behind the 8 ball on that. I would put it there. And that would, and we have to, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't have things here, but high-speed rail makes sense where there's so many people. And you know what? We put high-speed rail, we get a lot of people off the 401. We wouldn't be talking about the 413. We wouldn't be talking about an imaginary tunnel. Okay? So it's a great question. There's places where it should be. We're way behind the 8 ball in Canada on high-speed rail, and we need to go there. Thank you.
Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay, Chris?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so high-speed rail has always been something that I was very interested in, and I've done lots of research on. But the Green Party's platform is all costed, and I definitely do not have a cost for something like this. I imagine it would be way up there, but it is something that would be really neat, right? If you could go travel out west instead of a 4-hour flight, you know, a couple-hour train ride instead. Or even, like you mentioned, something that I always saw that was a potential would be from Windsor to Quebec City, I believe.
Yeah,
Something like that, a corridor that most of our population in our province lives within that corridor, well, within the country actually. And that would be probably the start, and then you could expand off of that, right, for high-speed rail. But like when people I know visit Europe, one of the first things they mention to me is always how amazing that is, right? They buy like a Europe pass, and it's a few $100s, and they're just zipping from every country, and they're getting to see everything. And Canada has a lot to offer. Ontario has a lot to offer. When you drive Highway 17 towards Sault Ste. Marie, it's beautiful, right? But you have to drive from here. I'm trying to think, how far would that be? 8 hours? And so on. Yeah, 6 hours. That's not. So, you know, you have a high-speed rail, you can get there a little quicker and see that part of the province, or get to Toronto much quicker. But as I mentioned, the cost, I think there's a few other priorities that I would work on first, like caring for the people with healthcare, education, and the rest.
Thank you,
Good
Chris.
question.
Rick Ellsmere.
It's kind of ironic that you asked that question. Today it was announced, tweeted by the City of Montreal, Canada is building a high-speed rail. Justin Trudeau tweeted that your bagels will still be hot when you get back to Toronto. So.
Thank you, Rick. Do you want to add anything to that, Steve?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was actually talking to a guy I know who's a conductor right now, and he travels the rails. And we were just talking about animals and stuff, because I seen some moose on my travels there in the last couple of weeks, and I said, "What's it like on the rail?" And he says, "Oh man," he said, "you don't believe how many moose we hit on the rails." Okay, that would be one of my concerns right off the bat. I think would be high-speed moose, high-speed bear. What's that going to do to the train? Because they have a much lighter engine system than what we have right now on our rail cars. So it's kind of like, okay, I want to keep guys safe too. So there's that aspect. Plus, the infrastructure for a high-speed rail is actually more intensive than what we have right now, because the speeds that they're going creates waves on the tracks. So it's a whole new base system, whole new rail system. And like Chris said, that's a lot of funding that's going to have to come from somewhere. That right now I don't see that being a smart investment, at least not up here in Northern Ontario yet.
Thank you, Steve. And I believe we have another question from the floor.
I can use my outside voice.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to talk about voter apathy. This room should be full, and it should be a diverse group of people. Raise your hand if you're in your 20s. And raise your hand if you're in your 30s. I have one candidate in their 30s. So I know it's an education piece, and what I'm coming across when I'm having conversations with friends, family, and the public is that people don't necessarily distinguish between political or provincial and federal politics. Right now, currently, we're only offering a half credit of civic at the high school. I believe it's a grade 10 program where it should probably be a grade 12 program where students are closer to the voting age. What are you going to do in order to elevate people's awareness, political awareness within our riding? And you have a very challenging riding because you're not in a metropolitan area. You have to travel hours to get to all of your constituents. So what kind of impact are you going to have in each of these communities?
Great question. Who wants to take that first?
I think I was first.
Okay, let's go, Chris. Do you want to do that, Mike?
No.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a great question. It's something that I'm seeing with a lot of people. People just feel disconnected with politics and they don't really care, I guess, or they're confused. It is confusing if you're not involved. I've been right involved now, so it's not as confusing as for me anymore, but I know it was before. Something that you did mention schools, and something that I enjoy doing is whenever schools ask me to go and present, my journey through municipal politics or just doing this at the provincial level, it's always something that I'll make sure I'll do. I'll take a day off work and I'll go do it. It kind of stinks. It's always in French. It always seems like it's the French people. My political words don't come out as well in French, but that's something I have to do. But something else that really matters to me is, even if you're not successful, we're all here presenting ourselves and fighting for what we believe in. And I just think it's important to try and raise that voter percentage at all times. So I know a lot of people that are younger, and that's something that I'm very proud of, is that I'm getting some people who are younger who always tell me, I've actually never voted before, but I listen to you talk and I know you personally, or I just got to know you at one of these events, and I'm gonna go vote. And I always make sure to tell people, even if it's not for me, go vote. Just make sure you go vote. It's ridiculous that we're getting 22,000 voters out of how many is it here? It's 57 or something around that. It's not enough. And then we start to complain about what we have or don't have. We need to raise that voter percentage, and there are ways to do that. It's by trying to engage the public a little bit more and make them feel valued, listen to their voices, bring their voices forward, speak on behalf of them, or just listening. Often it's just listening, and that's one way. It's a difficult thing.
Thank you, Chris. Steve?
Yeah, I love that question. That's a great question. For both ways, right? Educational and for voter apathy. And that's huge. I think we had just over 40% last election that turned out to vote. That's horrible. But you know what I'm finding? Because talking to people are tired of hearing politicians speak, and I get that right to my face. You're just another politician, or what? We're tired of hearing the same old thing. We're tired of hearing politicians tell us, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to spend this, we're going to give that, and then nothing happens. So I get, why should I vote? What does my vote have to do anything when all it is a bunch of hot air? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm passionate. I think you probably can figure that out already tonight. I'm passionate. I speak with passion. I have a drive because I don't want to be just another empty promise person. Like what I say, I want to see done, and I will fight to do that. So I actually want to find out why the schools have kind of reverted back to a grade 10. When I went to school, that was a grade 12 thing. When we had elections, if we were in grade 11 or 12, we got a political course. We got to play the candidate. We got to do our whole little mock elections. It was one of the most fun courses I think I ever had in high school, because we got to do this and it was fun. Why don't we teach this anymore? Like that. Let's look at this. Let's look at this from further on, because we need to teach our children, because there are voters for tomorrow. But as parents, we also need to teach our children, right? Because that's our job as a parent. If we don't vote, if we don't encourage our friends to vote, our kids aren't going to vote either when it comes down to it. So let's see what we can do here.
Thank you very much, Steve. Now we have Rick Elsner.
It's kind of disappointing. I was approached by the school in West Nipissing to do student Ontario votes 2025, and I did that video for them. I went to the principal of a couple schools. Are you guys doing student vote? No, too complicated with the school board, and that was the story I got. And then we see the President of the United States who doesn't understand civics himself, and he's influencing the world. So it's kind of scary. I remember in grade 7 having mock elections, and I'm going to date myself, and it was during the time when the snap election was called, and last time in February in 1980. So, and I remember that quite well. So, civics needs to be taught. They don't understand. We have a very complicated form of government. You know, we have different houses in different provinces call provincial legislatures by different names. Students need to learn that. I was unique in college. I did mechanical engineering as my major and history as my minor. And I remember having one of my professors go, "But you're in engineering, why do you have history?" But it's a love of the thing.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick. Now we have John Vantoff.
Thanks for the question. I know when I go to doors, the toughest ones, a lot of people don't support me, and they'll tell me, and that doesn't bother me, as long as they vote. But when I go to the doors, and you know, they just don't care. But I think we all, on this table, we all believe that we should have more voter participation. I question whether a government that calls a snap election in February really believes in increased voter participation. I question that, because it is going to be so hard to get people on February 27th, if it's 20 below or if it's blustery, you're gonna have to be super, super, super committed. And you know what? People aren't. And at our time in history, we just talked about history, so my family, I keep talking about my wife's family, they live in Holland right now. So we're talking about Trump, right? They're scared. Because last winter in Holland, a lot of them didn't heat their houses because they couldn't get natural gas. They haven't seen that since World War II. We talk about it. They feel it. That's why history is important. And that's why that people should understand how their political system works, how the world's political system works, and they don't. And it's as much our fault. Like, you look at some of the political ads, especially on social media, like, I don't even want to vote. No, like, no, I'm like, we're all guilty to a point, but it's one of those things, like we're talking about the opioid crisis. If we have, at some point, a crisis where people just don't care about democracy, we won't have it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I think we have time for one more question from the floor, or, well, this gentleman had asked for a question first. We'll see if we can get to you guys after this, okay?
You might have two.
Okay, all right. And also, these gentlemen, these candidates have also offered to stick around if you have questions one-on-one after the fact, so.
I'll be
if we
talking
run
to
short
each
on
one of the
time
candidates
here,
about
don't worry, you'll
participatory
get your
democracy,
chance. All right.
version of direct democracy,
Thank you.
to see what their opinions are later
My
on.
question is an infrastructure question, and it pertains to the town of Cochrane. About 3 years ago, I remember Carolyn Mulrooney, the Minister of Transportation at the time, and this is of interest to myself because I spent 30 years at INSCO, and I wish the Conservative candidate was here tonight probably has the answer or should have the answer. And I don't know if you people have the answer, but she promised funding for a bypass road to get the trucks off of Railway Street here. Whatever happened to that? Maybe you could answer.
It's been going on for a long time, that question. That's a great question. Okay, so we're gonna have Stephen McLeod. You may not have dealt with this, but we've been trying to get a bypass, I don't know how long. So it's been going on for probably more than a decade. But any thoughts on that one, Steve?
That's an excellent question. I have the same question. What's happened to it? Unfortunately, I haven't been in the House of Commons there, so I can't even tell you what's going on with it because I haven't heard a thing about it either. So I think I will actually defer that to Mr. Vantoff because he might know a better answer to that than I would, because that is something that I don't know either. I would like to know why, and you know what? If I get elected, I will definitely start looking into that because we do need that, right?
Thank you, Stephen. We don't all have to respond to it because it's something that you might be the only one with access to. Would you other gentlemen like to respond at all, or?
I'd be after John anyway.
Okay, yeah, would you like to say something about that?
Sure. It was actually at the Northern debate that I heard about it for the first time. I've been up here since 2018 in Inglehart, and we're up here all the time. It was the first time, and I started asking questions, but I got no answers.
Thanks. So you heard about the Cochrane bypass of the Northern Ontario debate because our leader, Margaret Stiles, announced that we were going to finally do it. So it was announced in the budget many years ago. Caroline Mulroney, with much fanfare, announced it. And quite frankly, the funding was siphoned off to go to Southern Ontario. That's 150 million, and that was where because it was so. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but announcements about roads getting fixed and stuff are often made and sometimes not followed up. And this was a case. The money, it wasn't in the budget. Like it was a long ways down the process, and as so many things, it just fell off the radar. Another one farther away from Cochrane, there's supposed to be a big rest stop by the field cutoff, more in your part of the world, and that was fully announced too, and never happened. And those are the kind of things that we have to push farther than just Clean Spark, because those are the things that make a big difference in people's lives. But that was announced, like it was set in stone, just never a stone was moved.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'll be pretty quick here, but it definitely seems logical, right? Every time I visit, I wonder, I'm speaking about dividing the highway, yet we come to a full 90-degree turn with 10 transports lined up, and it seems extremely dangerous to me that is still considered a Trans-Canada major highway. How this hasn't been done, I have no clue. John, I don't think anybody well, John has a pretty good answer there. It just didn't get done. Yeah. It just seems very logical to me. My mom and I spoke about that, and that's something that came to mind when I was thinking about pushing for the divided highway. I was like, how hard will this be if we can't even get something as simple as this done? But we just require the political will and to keep pushing. That'll be my answer for that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we had another couple of questions from the audience. Okay, I think we have time for maybe a couple more questions.
I can use my voice.
Okay, go ahead.
As a teacher, I do have a question with education. Buses are a huge problem. We used to have our own system here in Cochrane, and all of a sudden we don't. So our issue is sometimes we have kids that don't even make it to school. It costs us $2,500 to send a team to CAP. How does that make sense? How do the schools pay for that? We have to pay for that. And then all of a sudden our budgets get cut. because we have nothing to do. So we can't even offer extracurricular activities to our kids because of that. So how do you guys plan on addressing that?
That's a great question. We'll start with Rick on that one.
The big problem with the buses right now, they are having trouble recruiting drivers. I have a friend who runs a bus company down southern Ontario, and the number of people that she goes through, it's amazing. I talked to her and short 5 drivers today. So it's a constant struggle. The other thing is, it was funny, my wife commented the other day, she's seeing all these microbuses from the schools dressed up like private schools. And it was the first thing out of her mouth. And I said, we used to get a bus, but it was a school bus, but not like these fancy buses that they're using to go to school. And I think if you also look, the insurance prices for these operators are probably through the roof. And that's another thing that we need to handle within Ontario is the insurance.
Thank you. Okay, Rick, thank you for that. And now we'll have John Vantoff.
Thanks. Actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. So when I was first elected, it was one of the first things we dealt with. We used to have a lot of little bus companies here, and they could bid individually with the school boards and the Liberal government at the time. I'd like to blame everything on the Conservatives, but I can't. The Liberal government at the time changed the bidding process and forced school boards to only deal with big regional contracts. So you could bid on a contract for 3 buses in Cochrane, 2 buses in Iroquois Falls. It didn't make any sense at all. And that drove all the little bus companies out. All of them. And I have a Willard Bus Lines is in the southern part of my riding. I went to school with Jeff Willard. He goes, I've got maybe 2 or 3 years, I'm gone. And that's what happened. And he ran a really good company. Right? And at first the big companies, we're going to be so much cheaper. We're going to drive the price down. And we're not getting the service anymore. And that's part of the problem. Big Southern Ontario idea, we'll deal with the big companies. Doug Ford loves this too. That's why he'd love to have healthcare done by Shoppers Drug Mart. But let's look at the source of the problem. The source of the problem is they forced all the little guys out, so there's no little competition. And the big guys just sit there. And until somehow we change that, that's not going to change. It isn't. And every little bus company, all of them, warned us, warned the government. And the government at the day happened to be Liberal, but it just looked the other way. And that's what we're stuck with. And until we change that, we're going to keep being stuck with it. The reason they're having a hard time getting drivers is I see ads, flexible hours. Oh, come on, it's a crappy job. You need to be paid more. It takes your whole day. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Chris?
I think John ran out of time to be able to attack the PC government, so I'll throw one in there for you. This is why events like this are very important. I honestly had no clue that this was a problem, but being at this event, now I had the chance to hear from you, and someone who isn't here doesn't have that opportunity. So that's why we need to be coming to these types of events and hearing from people who are living this everyday life. I imagine, sorry, I did say it's first I hear, but I imagine you're not the only area that deals with this as well. So this is something that I really appreciate you bringing up. I do not have an answer or a costed way to fix it, but it is something that I'll definitely bring back to our executive board and see if I can push so that they could start doing some research into it, see if there's any cost benefit or any way that maybe there's programs available that apply for funding that they can help, or it just seems like a Northern Ontario specific problem, and that's a big reason why I wanted rural Ontario. Sorry, thanks, John. But yeah, that's my answer. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Chris. Stephen?
I actually like this question. I got my when I first got my commercial license, it was actually a bus driver's license, and it was over 20, almost 30 years ago. Okay. I want to ask right now, because I know a lot of us are probably at least in our 30s here, maybe some younger ones. How many of us remember being on the bus and the bus driver saying, "If you don't sit down, I'm pulling this bus over and we're not moving." Right? You can't do that now. I was a bus driver for public school, okay? And I got disciplined and suspended for a week because I moved a student that was trying to fight with other students up to the front of the bus. I didn't yell at them, I didn't swear at them, I didn't touch them. I had them move to the front of the bus. And their parent got upset about that and called the school board, and I got disciplined for that. We have, just like I said for the teachers, there is no safety for our bus drivers or our bus driver helpers. Okay? Our kids are our most precious commodities. Well, not commodities, they're our most precious thing in our lives. And we're trusting them with these drivers, yet we only pay them like a minimum wage or barely minimum wage. Okay? And like John said, you basically waste your whole day, right? You get maybe 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, but you don't really have time to do anything else. And we don't pay them enough for the precious lives that we are entrusting them with. So we need to look at that. We need to bring back not just the Safe Schools Act, but also for the school buses, because then we'll get that better sorted.
Thank you, Steve. We have time for one more question. Did you have a question?
Sorry.
Okay.
It's a quick one. So as an Indigenous person, I feel I need to ask each one of you this question. How are you going to get input from Indigenous communities, in your area? I'm very close to Charlie Angus. I think he's amazing. He goes into the communities, he listens to the voices, and he's been called names like Indian lover, you just look after them. I want to know and hear from you, what are your thoughts on working with Indigenous people and hearing their words?
It's an important question. I'll let you have that other one after, so I'll do one more after this. Okay, all right, we'll start with John on that. You want to have some words, thoughts on that, John?
That actually is a very good question. And I'm going to be really honest. Not that I haven't been honest for the rest of the night. It's actually not easy sometimes. And for me, I've had the incredible opportunity. I live in the same building as Saul Mamakwa, the only fully Indigenous MPP in Ontario. I walk to work with him every day. And he's one of my best friends. And I say things to Saul that I maybe wouldn't say in a formal setting, and I've learned so much from Saul. So I think Saul has made a difference for me to understand. So I learned from Saul what it's like to their shoes in front of Queen's Park from the residential school. Saul's a residential school survivor. I'll never know what it's like to be a survivor, but I know what it's like to be the friend of a survivor and stand next to him and watch those shoes. So I'm going to be, I try to work with Indigenous people. I don't always understand. Up front. Saul's helped me understand, and as I've done this job, hopefully I continue to learn and continue to work with Indigenous people. It's an ongoing effort from us all, and I learned this from Saul, but we have a colonial system, right? And often we don't even understand. We don't know what's colonial because we've never lived in another system, and we all have to work together to learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Chris?
Thank you very much. As John mentioned, it is very important to have a dignified and impactful relationship with our Indigenous communities. And growing up, I always considered myself pretty lucky. West Nipissing, we're very close to Doki's First Nation and Nipissing First Nation. So playing hockey, going to school, I had a chance to learn a lot from my colleagues, my friends. And then when I meet some other people who aren't that lucky, I get to see that other side where there isn't that dignified, respectful relationship. So I really appreciate the question, and it is something that the entire province, the entire country, everyone has to continue working on and getting better at. And the main thing in my mind, even for myself, is to always be open to learning and listening. Listening is key. So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Chris. Stephen McLeod?
Yeah, I want to thank you for that question too. And like these gentlemen have said, it's not easy. I've spoken many times with Gilles Ledru from Matheson, who's been working very closely with some of the different communities that are up here and really building some inroads in with them. And what he's finding and what I'm finding is, again, the trust factor has been so severely broken between politicians and Indigenous people. And that hurts my heart, because as a country, we shouldn't have that. So I am open, and I've told that to many other people that I've talked to in different communities, that I'm willing to listen. And that's the key, is willing to listen, keep my mouth shut and listen, hear what the problems are. And but it's going to come down to trust, right? If we can't build that trust, then they're not going to want to talk to us. So that's my thing, is we need to build that trust factor back.
Thank you, Steve. Rick Ellsner?
I identify as Indigenous. I'm Métis, but I also have two great-grandmothers on each side of my family. One was Ojibwe, and the other was Six Nations. So I have a little bit of Indigenous blood in me. My Métis side, they're from two families, and one lived in Fort Garry in Manitoba, and the other was Red River. What I would like to see happen, is my vision, is in the education system, get the elders and the Indigenous leaders into talking with the children. I know my children, we're lucky we go to a school where we have an Indigenous person come in every week and sits down and talks with the kids, and they love her. I also sit on the Timiskaming-Cochrane Council and their treasurer, and it's constant issues that we see. And growing up, we had an island reserve nearby, so a lot of the parents housed the kids so that they could continue in high school when the bay froze. So
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for that question. I think you had a question, right?
I did, but if they need to do closing remarks.
No, that's okay. We're going to make time for it because I think this is an important discussion tonight. So go ahead and add. Do you want Mike?
No, I got a pretty loud voice, and don't really know how to phrase this one, and might have a little bit of a wind up to it. I don't know enough about our trade agreements with between provinces and with other nations. So, and I know this is a barrier to it, but we talk about the housing crisis. You need wood to buy to build houses. We have all the wood you could ever hope for, and I know a lot of these products, these finished products, do get shipped back, typically over to the States. What are the barriers to having? Is there any way we could use the wood that's here to build the houses that we need? And I know this is a very complicated question when it comes down to our our trade obligations. But with the self-appointed king of America throwing up these tariffs threats, we might have to start looking at other options and other solutions to this. So is it possible for us to create new facilities to get the 2x4s that we need to in order to build the houses that we require? And is it possible?
Great question. We'll start off with Chris on that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, yes I do. Yes I do, actually. Thanks for the question. It kind of works out well because West Nipson actually is in the process of building a large facility, kind of something like you mentioned, where the wood will be cut by sturgeon brush. It'll be kilned. Well, I don't exactly know the process, but everything will be done there. And then they'll eventually build homes through L'Oreal Homes right there in Sturgeon. It'll create about 175 jobs. So it is possible. But then on the other aspect of the interprovincial trade barriers, I do believe that we have to work across party lines again to be able to break these down and kind of unite our country in eliminating some of the unknowns from some of these trade agreements that we don't know what may or may happen with some of these. So your question was great, and can we kind of do a circular economy with some of the resources we have? And it is possible because it is in the works in West Nipissing, so that is a great example. I actually now want to learn a bit more of it after you mentioned that, because I realize I don't understand the full process, but it is happening.
Thank you. Steve McLeod, your thoughts on this?
You're absolutely right. We have amazing wood here. Absolutely amazing wood, and we have everything we need here. I actually, years ago, I did a forestry program out of Northern College in Timmins. And part of the course was like a work placement, and we got to work in ecom in Timmins. And they do everything there, right? They get the log, they cut it into 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, various lengths. They dry it, they package it up. Where does it go? Right? Like you said, goes on my truck, and I take it over to the States. That's where it goes. Why is that? Why aren't we focusing on selling our products more here? Part of the reason is because our governments are keep adding taxes and taxes and taxes, and carbon tax this and carbon tax that. PC government's gone and included the carbon tax on industrial and that. So that's raised all that pricing up for you and I, the consumer. What is the answer to your question? We need to get rid of a lot of this taxes to bring these prices down. We need to make it better for our companies to provide the materials for our people. We need to reopen some of the mills that are closed around here, because that's gonna boost our economy, boost the job factors. It's going to create more jobs, which is going to create more self-esteem and more self-worth for people, which will help with our mental health crisis. And it's going to make everything better right across our riding. That's the best answer I got for you right now.
Thank you, Steve. Next up, we have Rick Elsner. Here you go.
With the trade, they get a lot bigger dollar in the U.S. compared to what they get up here. And I think it's the almighty dollar speaking. I don't know if you ever worked with Ponderosa pine. It's got to be the worst stuff in the world, and that's what they grow in southern U.S. It is horrendous. It dries out quickly, so that's why they like our softwood. And I think until we can, like the Georgia Pacific's owned by an American company. So, and most of these companies have American ownership, so we'll have to get the American ownership out, and because they're going to push it down there. And I think that's, simple math. They make more money, and that's what they're going to do.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks. That's a very complex question. So, for as long as we can remember, we have had a strong, stable trading partner, the United States of America, with a big population who bought our products. We no longer have a stable trading partner, right? And that's why a lot of products go south. And quite frankly, we grew, like, I'm a farmer, right? We could never eat the wheat and corn we produce in Canada.
Yes, sir.
So that's why a lot of it went to the States. So now we have to look, and if there's one good thing that's gonna come out of this, right? Now that we're seeing that we can't just depend on the States, because the States isn't what we remember the States as being, we're gonna have to, yes, look at how we can use our own products, but also look for other markets. Markets that might be a little bit farther away, markets that might cost a little bit more to get to, but they're also all looking at the States going, right? Like, we are going to have to look at other places, ourselves and other places, but we can't just look at ourselves, because there's not enough of us to actually, so if we're gonna have the forestry industry depend on building houses in Canada, you're gonna have a big contraction, right? If the agricultural sector is only gonna depend on the market in Canada, it's great for supply management. So dairy and eggs, we only depend on the Canadian market. But beef and pork and wheat and corn, agriculture's getting bigger here, right? Well, if we only had the Canadian market, it's all gonna go back to trees. So, but we have to look at broadening our markets, because we just can't depend on America anymore. Mr. Trump has proved that.
Thank you. So that's all questions from the floor. Thank you very much for all those very, very good questions. So now we're going to get to the final questions. We'll start with, I guess, Steve McLeod's up in the rotation. The final question is basically, what makes you the best candidate to represent the unique needs of Timiskaming-Cochrane at Queen's Park? And how will you ensure our voices are heard in provincial decision making? Let's start with you, Steve.
Well, thank you very much. I believe I would be the best choice. I have passion, as I've kind of proved tonight, I think. I have passion for people. I have passion to see things done. And I have that drive to see things done and get things moving. And I want to see our riding thrive both in residential and in economy. I want to see our schools and our kids and our teachers safe again. I don't want to see them in fear. I don't want to hear the kids saying they're scared to go to school. I don't want to hear the teachers say they're scared to go to school, which I hear almost more than I hear from kids. Like Chris, I am one that is not stuck to my party. If there's something that needs to get done, like our safe roads, like our passenger rail, I am more than willing to cross party lines to work with other parties, to work with other MPs, to get this done. Because what I believe I'm elected to do is to help you, to help this riding. What I believe that my neighboring riding's MPV is supposed to do is to help his people, to help his riding, and so on and so forth. Because we are elected to help our people, to help Ontario, and the only way we can do that, because we have a common goal, is to work together by any means possible. So I believe I'm going to be your best choice because I'm a fresh voice, I have passion, and I want to see things done. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve McLeod from the New Blue Party. Next up, we have Rick Ellesmere from the Liberal Party of Ontario.
I've spent my life working for communities and volunteering. I'm honored to represent the Ontario Liberal Party in this. Timiskaming-Cochrane deserves real investments in healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Our families, workers, and businesses deserve better than they have been getting for the last 7 years. I'm ready to fight for the change that you guys all need. We need a more prosperous future for our region. I know the Liberal Party is focused on fixing and investing in our healthcare system, ensuring timely quality care. I'm tired of listening to people say, well, I have a family doctor, but I can't see him for a month. And I actually talked to somebody in Sturgeon Falls the other day, and that's what they said. I have a family doctor, but if I need him, I have to go to emergency anyway. I want to strengthen the education system, and the best way is by supporting the students, the teachers, and the schools. We have schools falling apart. And we have to remember, Doug Ford has abandoned Ontario. He's looking after his rich friends. And with the absence of his candidate here, I'm going to say he's abandoned Ontario as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Now we have John Vantal from the Ontario Democrats.
Thank you very much, and I wish that the Conservative candidate was here. Because there's something floating around that you have to have somebody in the government side to get things done. So there's 80 MPPs on the government side in rural Ontario whose hospitals are closing, whose infrastructure is falling apart. I don't think that makes any difference. For me, I think I have proven that I speak up for this area. I get results for this area. Look up the questions I have had in the legislature. Look up when I asked a question about policing costs to the Solicitor General, and a week later they came up with an extra 89 million because it didn't make sense. Look at the question on the Northern Health Travel Grant when I asked the Minister of Health if she could give me a list of hotels you could get in Toronto for $100 a night. And then it took a little while, but they changed the travel grant. Is it perfect? No. But I have never, since I ran for election the first time in 2007, I have never refused an interview, I have never not attended a debate, and I have never refused a meeting with anyone. And I have been yelled at lots of times. But it's really important to be accessible at all times. I'm one of the few MPPs who we all get a budget for staff. I'm one of the few MPPs, all my staff are in Northern Ontario. I don't have anyone who writes speeches in Queen's Park, because if you see my speeches, nobody writes my speeches. but it's important, because this is a huge riding. So if I just had staff in New Liskeard, would that work? No. I have staff here. I have staff in New Liskeard. I have staff in Sturgeon. It's really important to me. I think I've represented you well. That's why I'm sitting here asking for your support to represent you again. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And now we have Chris Regard, your Green Party candidate.
Yeah. So thanks again for everyone to come out tonight. I had a really good time, and I hope one thing that we got from here is everyone goes out to vote. I feel like all you guys are committed to that. The Green Party's platform illustrates a real, practical, honest way of doing politics, and I hope I had the opportunity to share that with you today. So that's why, something that's interesting is Greens can represent their constituents, their voice. We don't have a party leader who tells us what to do. He's not our boss, which is very unique for provincial politics. So this is why the time has come. I believe we need more Green voices at Queen's Park. And so that's why this time I'm asking, please vote for the Green Party of Ontario and for a more caring Northern Ontario. It's a vote that says we don't have to spend $2.2 billion on a private spa in downtown Toronto, or $3 billion on election gimmicks like a $200 check at election time, or $100 billion on a fantasy tunnel under the 401. With these savings, we can actually invest in the people of Ontario and a good portion of it in Northern Ontario. We can properly fund healthcare so that everyone has access to primary care and open up our emergency rooms. We can make our Northern Ontario roads safer by eventually dividing Highway 11. We can tackle the housing crisis by making sure everybody has a safe and affordable place to call home and getting back into the business of building these affordable homes. we can support and invest in our northern communities so that people can keep enjoying the services we've come to enjoy or become accustomed to in our communities. But we also can do politics differently in a realistic, more practical way, which I like to think is the Northern Ontario way. And it's a vote that says we can create a better future for everyone where people are put before party politics. So on February 27th, vote for a true local voice, vote Green, vote Chris Rivard. And one thing I'd like to say at the end is I really hope we all watch the hockey game tomorrow and cheer very loudly when Canada beats the USA.
Okay, well, that brings our evening to a close. How about a round of applause for all these candidates who took the time tonight? Thank you all. Thank you for getting involved in politics. It's very important these days to stay active and stay involved in politics. We don't want to push these guys too hard. They've been here for over 2 hours now. But if anybody has a question they want to ask, maybe for the next couple of minutes, or we can probably get away with that. But we're going to basically shut down from as far as an official debate at this point. And just thank you all for coming out. Thank you for being involved in the political process. Good evening, bonsoir, wache. Thank you so much. Bye.
Just an FYI.